Welcome back to another edition of Cali X Boxing 2.0 YouTube. Check me out over on Twitter, Cali X Boxing 2. Shout out OJ22 over in the chat. And as you enter, make sure to leave a comment in the chat. That way I know who's out there. And also make sure to hit that like button as y'all come in the building. And this is the weekend wrap up. You know how we do on Monday. Just a couple random topics we'll hit on bit by bit. I hope my internet feed keeps up because I got a torrential rainstorm happening right there outside my window. So hopefully this internet keeps up. Shout out my guy Bruce Gas in the building. Salute to Bruce Gas and OG. Been around for decades and decades. Shout out my guy Bruce Gas, OG. And we'll be hitting on a couple topics randomly here as we do our weekend wrap up in the middle of talking about what we witnessed over the weekend. And what we witnessed over the weekend is a nice fight to be between Pedraza and Comey that ended in a draw. What did we talk about last week? We talked about betting odds told us that the most likely scenario was what? It was Pedraza by decision. All right. The least likely scenario was a draw. And what did we see? We saw a draw, and that's why we fight the fights on paper, right? That's why we talk about fighting the fights, actually fighting the fights, because fights don't happen on paper. They happen in reality. In mythical fights, they don't work because, as we see when guys fight each other, stuff happens. But that just goes to tell you the thin line we talk about when we talk about betting. Pedraza by decision was the most likely scenario. It was close to even odds. And then plus 1,600 is the draw. And it could have went either way. And what we saw was Comey coming out aggressive early. And that's what set the fight. That was the difference in the fight because a lot of people, the odds makers in particular, did not expect Comey, a big puncher, to be as aggressive as he was early in the fight. Sitting on combination punches and taking the fight to Pedraza early. And then 8, 9, and 10, Pedraza finally starts to come on and starts to even out the fight because up until round 8, I felt like this was a Comey fight. This is a good fight. This is what we get from Comey, right? Like Comey's a guy who wants to knock your head off, and that's why I love watching this dude fight. Coming into this fight, we said these are two guys that when they step up, they lose, but they beat everybody who they're supposed to beat. That's why we expected Pedraza to win this fight close by decision because he wasn't going to knock out Comey, but he was the favorite in the fight. We didn't expect Comey to land a big shot that was going to be the equalizer in this fight, and that didn't happen. But we also didn't expect Comey to outbox and really outwork and out-hustle Pedraza through 7 rounds, which what we saw in this fight, and that's what happened. But Pedraza, the better boxer, the better technical boxer, was not able to do that consistently through the fight. He was outworked by Comey early in the fight, and that's why he ended up losing the fight in a 10-round fight. And I think that's what most people missed when they were predicting this fight. A lot of people thought it was a 12-round fight, but a non-title fight, 10-round fight, crossroads fight, a fight that the loser of this fight could have went by the wayside a little bit, and the winner of this fight earns himself a nice crossroads fight, a nice gatekeeper fight against, say, a Teofimo Lopez, somebody like that at 140. Even though Comey's already lost to him, can maybe leverage himself into a bigger fight against a non-Teofimo Lopez type fighter. Who knows? Maybe he gets a big name at 140 if he wins that fight. But now, being the draw, neither one of these fighters lost the fight. I felt both of their stocks went up in this fight. Both stocks went up. So now I feel like they've both leveraged themselves in the draw against top 10 140-pounders looking to get a name on their resume. The issue is both these guys have fought a lot of these guys already. But at 140, they'll have fights for them, and both of their stocks went up in this fight. I thought Pedraza looked good in spots. I thought Comey looked good in spots, but they also both showed that they've been in big fights, experience-wise, but also you can tell they're a little shop-worn at this point. You can tell Comey couldn't sit on combination punches consistently throughout the fight the way he's been able to do in the past. Couldn't get his feet set the way he's been able to do in the past. Couldn't pull the trigger when he had openings in this fight against Pedraza. He wasn't able to pull the trigger on those openings during this fight and land the big equalizer shot against Pedraza. And Pedraza wasn't able to beat Pedraza and consistently box throughout the fight for 12 rounds. And that's why we saw a draw. Both guys fought in spots. Both guys had their moments. And in a 10-round fight, you have to get to it. You got to get to it. 8-rounders, 10-rounders. In a 12-round fight, you're able to, take some breaks, take some rounds off. You can't do that in a 10-round fight. Pedraza was outworked early in the fight. Comey gave up some rounds late in the fight, and that's why we got ourselves a nice old-fashioned draw. So whoever had the draw, as far as the betting odds, good play there because you got a nice payday at plus 1,600. And as far as this poll goes, man, y'all answer this poll that's out there. I think the poll is up there. But are y'all buying Ruiz versus Ortiz? Because if you don't know, this is Ruiz versus Ortiz fight weekend. And it's a Sunday night fight. It's a Sunday night fight. Are y'all buying the Sunday night pay-per-view? Ruiz versus Ortiz? Y'all let me know in the chat. Are y'all buying that? I want to see if I got that poll up. And the poll is not up. So just answer me in the chat. Are y'all buying Ruiz versus Ortiz on Sunday night? I'm taking a head count here. And if you're in the comment section, you're watching this in the archives, as most people do, make sure to leave your comment below. Are you buying Ruiz versus Ortiz? And I have a theory here. My theory is there's not much buzz with this fight. There's just not much buzz. Sunday night fight, Labor Day week. And PBC has been doing this thing where they put the Fox pay-per-views on a Sunday night before Labor Day. That's their thing they've been doing. And this is the fight, the Sunday night fight, Ruiz versus Ortiz heavyweight fight. And whoever wins this fight leverages himself into the Deontay Wilder fight. Because Deontay Wilder is going to fight Helenius. After he beats Helenius, I'm sure PBC is going to want to keep this money in-house and do Wilder. They want Wilder versus Ruiz. That's what they want. That's what they want. And things are shaping up nice for Wilder on the comeback, right? Because he gets Helenius, he matches up well with Helenius, and then he'll match up very well against Ruiz, in my opinion. Ruiz, a smaller heavyweight, shorter heavyweight. I should say shorter, not smaller, but shorter heavyweight that Deontay Wilder is going to be able to find his distance against. And if he lands a big punch against Ruiz, he can send him to hell. I'll be watching it, but buying it, come on. What are you alluding to, Bruce? What are you alluding to? What are you telling us, Bruce? It was up when I came in. I voted no. Yeah, shout out Major Key Boxing in the building. Yeah, I'm not buying it either. I'm not buying it. And look, Bruce has his way of getting the fight, as much of us do. So whether you buy it or not, I don't know. I'm saying buying it because a lot of people will be watching it and not buying it. But I'm not buying it. No, it's just not for me. PBC is doing too many pay-per-views this year. There are too many pay-per-views in general, but PBC is abusing the pay-per-view market. My way as a consumer, I speak with my money. I speak with my voice here on this channel. I mean, this channel is what it is. It's not a big network. It's not Ring Magazine or anything like that. But I do have my little voice here that I can speak. And I don't like all the pay-per-views that the PBC is putting on. Just don't like it. Don't like it. So my way of not supporting it is not buying it. And I just don't understand. Both of these fighters are on a trajectory down, particularly Ortiz, who says he's 43 years. Ortiz, who says he's 43 years old, but we know he's likely 53 years old. He's way up there in age. Ruiz is Ruiz. Is Ruiz a star? No, he was after the Anthony Joshua, the first fight. Not so much. He wasn't able to capitalize off of that after the first fight, but he can get things going again. If he were to beat Ortiz in this fight, and then come back and fight Wilder and then beat Wilder, now we're talking. Now Ruiz is back in business. But you're not going to get that off of fighting Luis Ortiz. It's not going to come in this fight. And I don't think the pay-per-view buys are going to do well. I just don't. I don't think the pay-per-view market's there for them. And I know why they're doing this. LSU versus Florida State plays at 5:30. Primetime game over on ABC. So as that game ends, you'll have ring entrances, ring walks. And as Thursday, Friday, Saturday college football games are being played, they're going to be promoting the hell out of Ortiz versus Ruiz this weekend. So they're hoping that the people who are watching LSU Florida State college football will go over after that fight and buy the pay-per-view for this fight. I just don't know if that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. My theory is that Spence and Crawford will be announced this week. Maybe I'm being gullible. And that's another question here. Do you think that Spence versus Crawford will be announced this week? It's another question for the chat. Y'all answer yes or no. Because my thinking here is PBC's running out of time to announce this fight. They already said they don't want to do this fight in December. The fight was supposed to happen in October. Now we're pushed back to November 12th or November 19th. And another fight was announced. I believe the Zerto fight was pushed back from November 5th to November 19th, by the way. So are we going to do 2 fights on November 19th? So whether this fight lands November 12th or November 19th, I don't know, but they're running out of time. They got about a week and a half, 2 at the most, to announce the Spence Crawford fight, or it's not happening this year. So my theory is they're going to announce Spence versus Crawford this week to take advantage of the eyeballs for Ortiz versus Ruiz. Set up some sort of press conference this weekend. I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping they start to roll out Spence versus Crawford this week, because that's the big fight everybody wants to see, obviously. That's the big one everybody wants to see. Marion Brown is an intriguing fight, though. Still hit that like button on the way in. Yep, I doubt it. Marion Brown saying he doesn't think so. Salute Capito Sur Central BXO, my guy in the building. Hope so. I hope so too. That's all I can go off of, because that's the big fight that can be announced. That's the PBC pay-per-view that I would buy. That's the one that I would buy. The one that I would buy. You know, that's the one PBC-worthy pay-per-view. They'll be promoting into the wrong market. What drunk college tailgater is going to go home and pay for this just to stay up later? I agree with that. I just don't think the college football market, and that's the question I've been asking the Twitter, for Twitter for years now, is because people always say, oh, they can promote during college football games. I don't think that's the market. I don't think that's the market anymore. This October 15th pay-per-view, Wilder versus Hellenius. The theory is that they'll promote on Fox College Football for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then they'll promote it very heavy during Fox College Football on October 15th. And after the last college football game on Fox, they'll then segue over to heavyweight pay-per-view boxing, Wilder versus Hellenius, and everybody's going to buy the pay-per-view and go over there. I don't think that's how it works anymore. Especially since college football will still be running. College football goes to 1, 2 a.m. It goes as long as boxing goes. Starts at 8 a.m. and then goes to 1 or 2 o'clock, because you got the West Coast games. 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, early Sunday morning. So you'll still have people watching college football as they watch Deontay Wilder and Hellenius is on. So I don't know if that's their market, if that's what they're going for. Impala in the building. Spence versus Crawford ain't happening, the GOAT Mario P says. I disagree. I think PBC has too much at stake here, too many eyeballs. PBC has been saying for 4 years, PBC has been saying premier boxing champions, but PBC has also been saying free boxing for all, right? Now all of a sudden they're pay-per-view boxing for all. But PBC has been saying for 4 years, the reason this fight's not happening is because that guy's over there. He's over there at Top Rank. If he just went to this side of the street, the fight would happen. Now he's over there on this side of the street. Now all the negotiations are happening through premier boxing champions. So if this fight falls through, whose fault is it? Everybody knows at that point that it's PBC's fault. For 4 years, they've been saying, if everybody's in-house, if everybody's under this umbrella, this fight happens. Now everybody's working in negotiations under this single umbrella. So if the fight doesn't happen, we all know who to point the finger at that point. So, I just have to, and this is naive boxing fan talking at this point. Admittedly, I have to believe that PBC is going to deliver this fight. As little faith as I have in PBC, as little faith I have in them, the little bit of faith I have left tells me that they have to deliver this fight. They have to. No other choice. They have to. They got to get it done. And the window is running out. They got a week, possibly 2. And a Ruiz versus Ortiz fight week would be the perfect week to announce the fight. Let's see if they get it done. Or do they get it done the week after Labor Day? But if not, if they don't get it done Labor Day week, next week, it's done. Finito. They're running out of time. I didn't know boxing was on a Sunday. Yep, it's on a Sunday, as is college football this week, Labor Day week. So PBC's been doing this thing where they do the Sunday night pay-per-view before Labor Day, thinking this is something that's going to catch on. And to me, it's just not catching on. It's not catching on. The pay-per-view market, besides Canelo, dead. Guys are making money on pay-per-view because these are cheap pay-per-views that PBC is putting on. PBC is putting on mismatched pay-per-views where the B-side is cheap. The B-side is cheap. And the reason they're doing the pay-per-views is because they can't afford the A-side otherwise. If Wilder doesn't fight on pay-per-view, they can't afford the minimum. And if they have a strong B-side, they can't afford the B-side. So they have to put Deontay Wilder on the pay-per-view against the B-side that is affordable. Tank Davis has a similar model. It has to be a cheap B-side. That way they don't have to sell too many pay-per-views. They can sell 100, 150. That's their minimum that they have to make. They can make a little bit of money off of it, and the wheels keep rolling. And then they can still simultaneously claim that Deontay Wilder is a pay-per-view fighter. Tank Davis is a pay-per-view fighter. Traditionally, they're not putting up big pay-per-view numbers. They're just not. But they can still call them pay-per-view fighters because they're putting them on pay-per-view in order to make a little bit of money, in order to match their minimums, get in the green, and they're doing it with cheap B-sides. And as long as their market continues to buy it, they can get away with it. But at some point, I have to have the faith that their market stops buying it, that the market gets bored with it. Because until the market gets bored with Tank Davis fighting cans on pay-per-view, he's going to continue to fight cans on pay-per-view. They're going to continue to take advantage of a dumb market until the market either goes away or the market wises up. And that's what we got with guys like Tank Davis and Deontay Wilder versus Helenius. And they're also simultaneously shutting up people who are complaining about it, because when I complained about it on Twitter, I'm told to shut up by the PBC fans. If you don't like it, don't buy it. All right. That's how you want to have it. That's how you want to have it. PBC thinks boxing fans are stupid. Well, I got to be honest. I got to be honest. I don't think boxing fans are stupid, the hardcores, but I think a lot of the PBC fans are just casual boxing fans, just coming through. They're fans of particular fighters under the PBC umbrella, and they're out there charading as hardcore boxing fans. You see a lot of the channels here on YouTube. I'm not going to name names, but we all know the names, and we all know the network. But not the most intelligent market, if we're being honest. It is what it is. I'll leave it at that. There was a lot of talk last week about Undisputed and Devin Haney. And I talked about it briefly. And let me just bear with me for a minute, because I want to wrap up a couple more thoughts on Devin Haney, pound for pound. And if you look at my top 12 pound for pound, I have Haney on it at number 12. I don't have Lomachenko on it. And that's mine. Look, everybody's pound for pound is subjective. I don't get ruffled up about pound for pound anymore. It's a fun thing to do. It's a mythical list just to engage in some banter back and forth about who's the best fighters pound for pound. It's not meant to go to where it's gone the past week. It's not meant to go there. It's not. You shouldn't be that serious. Like, you shouldn't have that much animus towards a publication or anybody who puts out a pound for pound list just because you disagree with it. It is what it is. And if you have that much of an issue with it, make your own. That's the beautiful thing about pound for pound. You can make your own. You can make your own. I'm just a little dude here on the internet, little channel. On my little channel, I have my pound for pound list. On my little blog on the internet, calixboxing.com, I got my pound for pound list. People can go there. I have my receipts. It's transparent. This is why I have the pound for pound list this way. And the issue that I have with pound for pound in engaging people on pound for pound conversations is a lot of the people who are critical about pound for pound lists don't have their own. So I feel like a lot of people who are critical about top 10 pound for pound lists probably have like 87 fighters on their pound for pound list. That's how I feel. But as far as Devin Haney and pound for pound, if you want to argue Devin Haney belongs on your pound for pound list, you have a case because he's undisputed. But you also have a case for keeping him off because he has, out of everybody, I counted about 22, 24 fighters who are in consideration for top 10 pound for pound and try to break them down. And it's hard at that point when you start to make cases for 24 fighters in the top 10 pound for pound. If you're really serious about making a top 10 pound for pound list, it's hard to separate these guys. And to me, undisputed is a good separation factor for me. I value the belts. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But for other people, it's resume. It's resume and the eye test. So I could understand completely how somebody could watch Devin Haney fight and say, you know what? Eye test? I don't know if he's one of the 10. I don't even know if he's in consideration for one of the 10 best fighters in the world. And I completely understand that. Also, when you look at resume and you look at, you take those 24 fighters and you compare and contrast resumes, Devin Haney has one of the weakest out of all, if we're being honest, because he's young. He's still young. He's still got a lot to accomplish. Undisputed is a great accomplishment, but not all undisputeds are equal as well, right? Devin Haney's road to undisputed was a lot less tumultuous than Jermell Charlo's, right? He accomplished a lot less before he got undisputed than Canelo did. Canelo's undisputed run at 168, we can argue how tough it was, how easy it was, but what we can't argue is his resume that he put together before that in multiple different divisions. The amount of fighters that he fought, the amount of world, I think he's up to 16 or 18 world champions he's fought up into this point. And how many does Haney have? And that's what I'm saying. We then have to have the discussion is how much equity has a fighter built up? How much equity has a fighter built up before a loss? So how much forgiveness do we give him? And then the strongest case that Ring Magazine made last week for Lomachenko being in and Haney being out, or for Lomachenko being in, I should say, is I can't think of a single case. I can't think. I went back where a fighter in the 21st century who was on the pound for pound list, and it probably dates back further than that. I just went 21st century, where a fighter who was number one on pound for pound list, on big publication pound for pound list, at the time of a loss, fell all the way out of the rankings off of one loss. Can't think of one. Canelo just lost to Bivol. He's still top 5 in most big publications, if not all big publications, pound for pound lists. Chocolatito loses a Sorong Vise. He was number 1 when he lost, pound for pound. How far did he fall? A couple spots, but he stayed on the pound for pound list. Manny Pacquiao to Timothy Bradley, Juan Manuel Marquez, he was still on the pound for pound list. Bernard Hopkins loses to Jermaine Taylor twice, stays on the pound for pound list. He was pound for pound king, stays on the pound for pound list, are arguable. Some people had Hopkins, some people had Mayweather at that point, but he was 1 or 2, stayed on the pound for pound list. Roy Jones gets knocked out by Antonio Tarver, stays on the pound for pound list. The precedent is a fighter who is won or arguably won, because at the time where Lomachenko lost to Teofimo Lopez, the conversation was Lomachenko and Crawford, 1A, 1B. Some people had Crawford, some people had Lomachenko, and Canelo was sitting right on the outside at number 3. Some people had him number 2. But Lomachenko was seen, I would say, by most publications as number 1. So he loses to Teofimo. He doesn't fall all the way out the rankings. He falls a little bit in the rankings, but he doesn't fall all the way off. And then he comes back. It's not like he's just sitting around. He beats Nakatani. He beats Comey. And he stays on the pound for pound list. So the people up in arms and gnashing their teeth that Lomachenko's in the top 10 pound for pound, I just don't understand that. I just don't get it. I don't have him in mind. But at the same time, I think Ring Magazine and other publications that have Lomachenko in the top 10 make a good case for it. They've made a strong case for it. They've made a good enough case to where I don't think you can criticize him for it. I don't. And I have Haney in my top 12 pound for pound list. I have Haney, number 12, and I have Lomachenko out of mine. But I still get it. I still understand the argument. And I think there are good arguments on both sides. And I think we need to go back to a place where you can disagree with people and not try to take their heads off. And Devin Haney, I just don't understand. It's a mythical list, man. So to want to give up the belt that you've earned for lineal, the lineal belt, like it's something of real value. It's a belt that you can hold, and you can hold it and say, I am the lineal champion. And you can throw away the belt and still claim that you're the lightweight king and the lineal champion. I get that, but it's a belt that has meaning, and you're giving it up for something that has no meaning. It's a mythical pound for pound list. It's a fun thing to do. It's a fun thing to engage in these conversations, but it's of little meaning, of no meaning. It's mythical. And the belt is a tangible thing. It's a real thing. So to give it up for something that provides no value, I don't understand it. Let me get to some super chats. Shout out some people before. I saw some people come through. Chicano Prophet, my boy, PBC for life. My guy, the OG, one of the best to ever do it, Mr. Boxing Today, too, in the building. And I'm going to be talking about Big Baby in a minute because I know he's into the heavyweight boxing. I'm really excited about Big Baby. Remy, appreciate the super chat, man. Always appreciate Remy. Was chatting it up with him about some Espanol over on Twitter earlier. Shout out my guy, Remy, my guy, Calix. Yep, Remy. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate the support. Appreciate Nando. Salute Calix, everyone. One good thing about this Loma Haney controversy, that fight got a lot more interesting. Legacies are on the line. That's what I'm saying. And that's one good argument for Haney too, is the ring belt. It's much like Fury, right? Fury, the ring belt didn't bring much value to him at the time. It's still valuable, but it's still a real thing. But Tyson Fury can give up the ring belt, say he's retired, because he knows he can come right back to it. And then he can say he's a multi-lineal champion, right? He can come right back to it. That's not the belt that provides value in negotiations. It might, but likely not. The belt that provides value in negotiations is the WBC belt. That's the one that Fury had to hold on to. It's the one he had to hold on to. It provides him value in negotiations because it brings him the undisputed fight. If he gives it up, it's no longer an undisputed fight. It brings him value. So he held on to that one. But he said, you know what? I don't need the ring belt right now because I can give it up and I come right back to it. I can come right back to it. If I drop the WBC belt, Usyk's not going to be in line for that. They likely give it to the Wilder Helenius winner. Likely, right? It likely goes into PBC hands. But if I keep the WBC, I have negotiation leverage and I can fight in an undisputed fight in my next fight. He knew that was the belt that held value in that case. Haney's the same thing. Haney says, hey, if I get rid of the Ring Magazine lineal belt here, I can circle right back to it against Lomachenko because we're 1-2 in the division. So we'd fight for the vacant belt if it becomes vacant. So he knows he can circle right back to it. That's still a fight with huge legacy on the line, as Nando says, and that's pound for pound implication fight, because that fight right there silences this whole discussion. The whole discussion right now is who's better pound for pound, who should be top on the pound for pound list. And there's also another part of this discussion. The other part of this discussion is this. There are people out there saying since Haney is ranked above Lomachenko, he belongs on the pound for pound and Lomachenko doesn't. That's not how it works either, because there's precedent for that currently right now. If you look at every major publication has Spence number 1 in welterweight, Crawford number 2. But they all have that flipped on the pound for pound. They all have Crawford above Spence, and I'm one of them. I have Crawford above Spence in my pound for pound, Spence above Crawford in my divisional. And the reason for that is you look at what Crawford did before he moved to 147. He was undisputed at 140. Plus, the eye test tells us that Crawford is likely the better fighter than Spence. So there's precedent for that currently. But this can all be silenced in the spring, and I think it will be. Because one thing about Bob is Bob's going to make this fight. Bob's going to deliver this fight. As long as Haney beats Kambosos, which is what we expect, because Haney is a huge favorite, minus 800. Should take a care of again. And then Lomachenko should obviously win in October as well. And then we silence all of this. We silence all of it. And here's the frustrating part about it for me, too, is I can say 9 great things about Devin Haney, and then the 10th that I say is a little bit critical, I'm called a Haney hater. That's the frustrating thing about this. It's frustrating. Everybody who's been following me knows how great I've talked about Haney this year so far, about him signing a multi-fight deal with Top Rank just to get those belts, to fly out to Australia, to agree to a rematch clause, saying that he wants Lomachenko, and I think he does. And knowing that in this 4-fight deal, he's going to fight 3 or 4 great fights. So I've talked highly of Haney, but the one time I'm critical and saying, why are you getting so petty over this pound for pound thing? And the Haney fans, why are you getting so petty about this pound for pound thing? And another thing this tells me is that pound for pound list, it's not a bad pound for pound list. It's not. And what this tells me is this whole skirmish, this dust up is not about that pound for pound list. This has been coming for a while. And I know it because they do this to me on Twitter. They do it to me on Twitter. They lurk in the shadows, and then one time they feel like they can jump out at me, they jump out at me. And then that's when it all comes out. They've got stuff saved in the drafts, and then they're going to come after me. This wasn't about that pound for pound list. This Haney versus Ring Magazine, Haney fans versus Ring Magazine. And Haney needs to be careful about who he warms up to on Twitter and YouTube. I'll say that as well. I'll just throw that out there as a little bit of advice, because once they're done with you as a pawn, they're using you as a pawn right now. Once they're done with you, these channels, these Twitter handles out there, once they're done using you as a pawn, you're done. You're in the trash. They're just using you right now. Be careful who you warm up to. That's all I'm going to say. But this ain't about that pound for pound list. Something deeper going on there. I'll say that. But as far as the belts, circling back to the belts, and I didn't see this super chat, Jamal Charlo has been called out by Yanibek. Great fight. And a great fight that's not going to happen. Yanibek. Yeah, I saw him call out Jamal on Twitter earlier, and that was actually on my list of stuff to talk about this on this, the inactivity report. Jamal, it's been 14 months now. Jamal is the anti-Jermell. Just a guy, I don't know what happened to him. I just, it's frustrating to watch, because a guy who has every bit the talent as Jermell does, and you look at what Jermell's doing as opposed to what Jamal's doing, it just goes to show you, man, like equal opportunity does not equal equal outcome. That's what that shows you. Same household, same amount of talent, and look at what one has done compared to the other. Same promotional company, same advisor, same access to fights, and just not getting it done. Not getting it done. Jamal's now 14 months. 14 months. 14 months. 14 months. Yeah. So appreciate that, Remy. Yeah, I did read this article, and they made it make sense. That's the thing. Like if you're challenged as to why you think a certain thing, you should be able to concisely explain your argument. And if you are, then people should be able to say, okay, I get that. I don't agree with this still, but I get it. Like still, I have Haney above Lomachenko in my pound for pound, but I fully understand why you would have a guy who has accomplished a lot in a certain amount of time, who has built up a lot of equity over this fighter who is still young. Lomachenko is now a three-division champion. Passes the eye test. Only lost one fight in the recent years. He lost to Salido back then, but he had a nice run since Salido. Lost to Teofimo. He was number one when he lost to Teofimo, and they made another great argument as to number one does not fall all the way out of our rankings when he loses a fight. They have precedent to back it up. They put out a good argument. I just hold the belts at a lot of value. So a guy who has 4 belts, no matter how he got them, and they're not all equal. Like I said, they're not all equal. That's why I have Jamel higher. That's why I have Canelo higher. They're not all equal. That's why I had Josh Taylor higher on my list when Josh Taylor entered the rankings. But Haney entered my rankings at like 10 or 11 when he became undisputed. I think 10. And he's dropped a couple spots since as guys have done things to go ahead of him. Bam Rodriguez, Shakur Stevenson. I just think they're better fighters with higher ceilings. But he's hanging on the list by a thin thread. But he's on it for undisputed. And that gets me back to belts. Because I see guys on Twitter advising Devin Haney to give up the belts because belts are just aesthetically pleasing trinkets. And look, man, unless you've built up enough equity, unless you've done enough to have leverage without the belts, you shouldn't be advising guys to give up the belts that hold meaning and bring these fighters added money at the negotiation table. And Haney ain't that dude yet. Canelo is. If the WBO comes out next year and says, we're ordering you to fight Boo Boo Andre because he won the eliminator. He won the interim belt. It's time. And Canelo don't want to fight that fight because he has other options. He's already become undisputed at 168. He's Canelo. Tell him to kick rocks. And there are exceptions to the rule, but the rule is belts matter. But there are a few exceptions to that rule, right? There are a few exceptions to that rule. Canelo would be one. He's built up that much equity to where the belts don't matter to him at that point at 168. So he could say, you know what? I'm going to go fight another fight. They put 45, 50 million on the table. I'm going to go fight that other fight. I'll circle back to this if I want it back. And he'll be able to circle right back to it because Boo Boo Andre will be waiting for him with open arms on his knees, begging for the fight if Canelo circles back. But those are the few exceptions. Mayweather and Pacquiao, when they had runs at 147, it was like, do they really need the belts at that point? But when it comes to Devin Haney, he's not. So the belts matter so much to Devin Haney that he gets this belt that some people say he deserves, some people don't. Some people call him email champion, but he had the belt, and he leveraged that belt into an undisputed fight with George Kambosos. He cared so much about the other 3 belts and the ring belt that he flew all the way across the planet, 24-hour flight, to collect those belts. He cares so much about these belts that he's willing to fly all the way back across the planet, 24-hour flight, in order to defend, in order to try to keep these belts that are meaningless. No, doesn't add up. They do provide him meaning. They do provide him value because he knows. He knows what his fans apparently don't know, or maybe they're just speaking out this way outlandishly because they're mad at Ring Magazine. I don't know. But to advise a guy who his whole claim to fame, his whole resume up to this point is those belts, and to advise him to give them up when he plans on staying at 135 and he has big fights at 135 on the horizon, not good advice. Not good advice. If he dropped a belt, if he dropped 2 belts, would he hold as much leverage against Lomachenko in negotiations for the spring? Would he even land the Lomachenko fight at that point? Probably, but maybe not. Maybe not. The belts matter. They matter, they matter, they matter. I can give you multiple examples recently of why they matter. Guys leveraging themselves into fights that they normally wouldn't have gotten because they had that belt. Unification fights, undisputed fights. Caleb Plant got $10 million. Caleb Plant, let me repeat that. Caleb got $10 million because he had a belt. Benavidez hasn't gotten the Canelo fight. Why is that? Let me ask the chat. I'll leave it up to you to answer. Why didn't Benavidez get the Canelo fight yet? Why hasn't he gotten it? Canelo proved at 168 on his run that he valued one thing. What did he value? He valued the trophies. He valued the hardware. He wanted undisputed. And for these people who think that Canelo would have ducked Benavidez, even if Benavidez had that belt, that he gave up on the scales, and Caleb Plant came and scooped it up. He vacuumed it up and ran with it. This is exactly right. No belt. No belt. Shout out my guy, Wheelchair Man John, Toby Bartlett in the chat. No belt. Benavidez, no belt, no fight. You ever seen those? You ever walk up to like a store or convenience store, no shirt, no service? It's the same thing with Canelo's run at 168. No belt, no fight. No belt, no fight. And the Benavidez fans are delusional, who think that the ones that think that if Benavidez would have had that belt, he still wouldn't have got the fight because Canelo's ducking Benavidez. No, doesn't add up. Track record. Canelo's track record has shown that he'll fight guys. He'll fight Mayweather. He'll fight Trout. He'll fight Lara. Everybody was telling him, those guys are all wrong for you. He fought them. Bivol all wrong for you. He fought them. And maybe it's a cherry pick gone wrong. Maybe. But he went up to 175 and fought the best statistical defensive fighter in the sport. That's what he did. Whether he thought it was an easy fight, whether people think he thought that was an easy fight, people are mind readers. I don't know. But he went up and fought it. Bivol's a top 10 pound for pound guy. He went up and fought him. So he wouldn't have ducked Benavidez. But my ultimate point is Caleb Plant got that fight. That belt ended up being worth $10 million. A single belt that he vacuumed up, that David Benavidez dropped on the scale. David Benavidez dropped $10 million on the floor. Caleb Plant came and scooped it up. $10 million. All because he had that single belt. It brought him that much value. So if you think a guy like Devin Haney, who I'm told is super boring, not all that great of a fighter, if you think the belts don't matter to him, his actions show that they do. He knew how valuable those belts would be, which is why he flew to Australia to get them and why he's flying to Australia to keep them. And he knows how much leverage they're going to bring him in Lomachenko discussions. And he knows an undisputed fight with Lomachenko is likely a pay-per-view fight. Maybe it won't be. Likely will be. Undisputed against Lomachenko. Big fight. And it's a big fight. Haney versus Lomachenko with no belts on the line. It's a good fight for us. For undisputed, for all the belts, for all the marbles at 135, for lightweight supremacy, and for pound implications, huge fight. But the other reason the other reason that the belts matter is without those belts, Haney's not even in the pound for pound discussion. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it honest. He's not in the pound for pound discussion, pound for pound top 10 discussion if he doesn't have the belts. That's what brought him value We're not talking about Haney being top 10 pound for pound, possibly, if he's not undisputed. That's what separated him from some of the other fighters that are in consideration. That's what separated him from those guys. It's trophies. Trophies matter. These belts are trophies. The 4 major ones plus the ring, they're trophies, and they're trophies that matter. That's the other part of the belt discussion. Is this is a sport after all. It's a sport. Trophies matter in sports. And we have 4 or 5 trophies that matter in this case. And Haney knows that. Haney knows that. He was lashing out last week, and once again, I'll give this advice. The people who are lashing out with you on the YouTube channels, over on Twitter, be careful who you warm up with. Be careful, Devin Haney's dad. Be careful who you warm up to, because once they use you, they're going to throw you away. First opportunity to get, they're going to throw you away. I'll just throw that out there. Kambosos getting $10 million for the rematch. And that's another part of this. Like, when you have Undisputed on the line, guys who a year ago, Haney versus Kambosos, we would have never thought these guys would be in the discussion for $10 million per fight. Same thing with Caleb Plant before Canelo came into the picture at 168. And that's why Benavidez was probably, at the time when Benavidez missed weight, he's probably like, it's just a belt. I'll come back and get it. Cost him $10 million. He didn't know at the time that he relinquished that belt on the scale. David Benavidez had no idea he was dropping $10 million on the floor. No idea. No idea. And for the people out there advising Devin Haney to give up belts just because they're mad at a mythical pound-for-pound list, so stupid. Like, the more I think about it, it's just so stupid. But the people out there advising Devin Haney to give up things of value because they're mad at a publication, I'm glad, I'm thankful that these people are not advising actual fighters in real life. Because you don't know how valuable these belts can be. You don't know how valuable monetarily that the belts that Devin Haney holds actually are right now. You don't know what you're giving up if you give up a belt, 2 belts, 3 belts. What fights are you giving up a year from now? Because like I said, a year ago, we would have never thought Haney versus Kambosos. A year and a half ago, Haney versus Kambosos for Undisputed at 135. Things happen, and things happen fast. So my advice would be, hold on. If you're that type of fighter, if you're at that level, unless you're Canelo, Mayweather, Pacquiao, guys who bring value just off of your name, you should not be advising these guys to give up things that are of value and bring you more value. Because Devin Haney isn't just walking around as Devin Haney, and he's not worth $10 million just walking around as Devin Haney. He's not. He's not. Why would he give up the belts he fought for? He's undisputed. He just keep them all as long as he can. That's what I'm saying, Haplo. But there are people out there advising him to give up belts because they think he's bigger than the belts at this point. And it's just not the case. It's not the case. And the reason they're doing it is they feel they're angry at a pound-for-pound list, a Ring Magazine pound-for-pound list. They're mad at him. So they think they're mad at the publication. So they think he should give up the ring belt. And they're also saying that, you know what? The belts don't matter. They don't matter. I keep hearing that the belts don't matter. I've heard it from Ryan Garcia. I've heard it from Tank Davis. I've heard it from even Bernard Hopkins, of all people. The belts don't matter. Leonard Ellerby, the belts don't matter. They don't matter. They matter. They matter. I've just given you specific examples as to why they matter. Is Ndongo ever in an undisputed fight in Omaha with Terrence Crawford without the belts? No. They matter. They matter. There are few exceptions to it. Few exceptions to it. And each belt holds a different amount of value, right? They're not all equal. They're not all equal. But all I'm saying is they matter. They matter. It's a dumb argument to say they don't matter, and it's just dumb advice to tell a guy who needs the belts. That's his whole resume at this point. Devin Haney's whole resume is the belts. The belts. That's his resume. He got a belt. He leveraged it into Undisputed. Flew across the planet to get the other belts. He's flying back across the planet in order to keep the belts. They matter. His actions prove that they matter. They matter. Ask David Benavidez if belts matter. They matter. Ask Caleb Plant sitting in his mansion that Canelo got him. Canelo got him that mansion. Canelo got him the Ferrari. Canelo got him whatever. Canelo got him the trust funds. $10 million. He realized that Benavidez dropped the bag and he went and picked it up. No, I mean, and this is a discussion, HLD, that D-Style and I had 6-7 years ago. And I'm getting a call, so I don't have much longer. But it's a discussion we had, and I was against pound for pound list, and D-Style, obviously, he's not for the list, but he's for the concept of pound for pound. And the concept of pound for pound is a real thing because it exists in our heads, and it's discussions that we have, right? And boxing history tells us that pound for pound came about because of Sugar Ray Robinson. We have a heavyweight champion. We have a pound for pound champion. It's good engagement. It's good talks, but it's fictitious. It's mythical. It's something that it's great to be crowned the pound for pound king. But as far as the list, where you land on the list, are you like if Ring Magazine expanded their list to the top 20, I'm sure Devin Haney would be somewhere on there, maybe 15, maybe 16. But where you land on a mythical list shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter to Devin Haney more than the thing that does matter. And he's willing to give up the thing that does matter, that does provide value for the thing that doesn't matter. He wants to give up his ring belt, lineal championship, because this is the trophy that marks the lineal champion. We can still, I don't know how that works. If he drops the ring belt, I don't know if the lineal championship goes up vacant. I don't know how that works, or if he's still considered a lineal belt without having the trophy in his possession. I don't know how that works. But what I'll tell you, that's super confusing. But what I'll tell you is it's something that brings value, and he's giving it up for something that's, as you say, fictitious, is mythical, and it doesn't bring value. Lomachenko can't go up to Devin Haney in the negotiation table and say, hey, I'm number 6 on Ring Magazine's list, and you're out of it. So fork up some more money. No, it's not how that works. But what Devin Haney can do is he says, I have the 4 major belt, WBO, WBC, WBA, IBF, plus the ring. I'm the lineal champion. I am undoubtedly the undisputed lineal champion of the world. So why would he give up the lineal title, the lineal trophy, for something that is valueless? And that's a pound for pound, mythical pound for pound list. I don't know. Yeah, and this is what's super confusing to me is, yeah, I guess different. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but shouldn't give up that ring belt. He should be keeping it, and he should be keeping all his belts because he's earned them, and they bring him value. In that case, my apologies for not getting the big baby and his performance. I will be getting to that tomorrow. Y'all tune into that. I appreciate y'all as always, man. Y'all have no idea how much I appreciate y'all swinging through and tuning in. On that note, I'm out. Y'all have a great Monday. God bless.